Welcome to the Running on Grass podcast. As always, I'm your host, Logan Pribino, with my co-host, Eamon O'Toole. How we doing today?
Great, Logan. Getting a little rain this morning. How are you?
Good. We just missed our rain chance over the weekend, so definitely a little jealous on that front.
Yeah, poor kids that just graduated here. Everybody was having their graduation parties last night, and everything had to be moved indoors because it was so wet.
Yeah, we went to some graduation parties on Saturday, and it rained in town here, but it just didn't up north. But I wore my rain jacket. It was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, that's really nice. We were at one that was planned to be indoors, so it worked out well for us. Are you guys starting to see any more moisture coming your way or anything that way?
You know, I was talking to a buddy at church yesterday, and we had really, really good fall precipitation. And so when the grass went dormant there in late October, it was in great position. So the range looks better than it should given the precip conditions that we've had, but we're definitely short on the spring. We've had 2.5 inches since the first of the year, which is not. It's about 60 to 70% of normal.
Wow, we're in a situation here where we just didn't have the winter. We've talked about that, but now we're getting all these spring rains, which is a little late out in my desert stuff because it does look tough. But they did catch this rain as well, and then the rest of everything is really coming on great. We didn't have that big cold winter like we often have here, which I'm not going to complain about because that's everybody kept saying, "Boy, what are we going to do?" I said, "I guess we just enjoy this thing, and then we'll deal with the consequences later." And turns out the consequences for us have been rain and light snow.
You lucky dog.
Yeah, so yeah, we've had about an inch just this week, so we're very fortunate and we're very thankful for that, and we I guess we'll keep moving forward and do what we can with what we get, and the forest is working pretty good too.
Good. How else is everything going?
We just got in our yearlings that we purchased over the winter, and I think we talked a little bit last time. They had 9,000 head of cattle. I think baby calves to yearlings to mama cows, everything through Torrington on Wednesday last week, and there was even an article in one of the Western ag magazines or newspapers that I saw, and the whole thing is all about drought. And I was up at a track meet for my older son this weekend, and you get north of Rawlins, Wyoming, and the state of Wyoming is just dry. It looks tough, and Rawlins South looks pretty good. And it was raining on my way home from once you got to Rawlins, it started raining. So I don't know what the pattern is there, but we got in our yearlings and worked really good. Got them up into their summer pasture, and we're hanging out on some private ground until our forest permits open up. But cattle look as good as they've ever looked. The guys there at Silver Spur Feeders took great care of them, and thanks to you introduced me to them, and those cattle that I've brought in other years kind of were a little waspy, and these ones came in really nice and just easy to
Good.
handle.
Glad to hear that. Yeah, because we were feeding up there, and they always came out of that lot good for you guys. So I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. How about you? Your yearlings, what's that looking like? Getting ready to send them to me here in 4 days.
Yeah. So they're running out on grass. Got them on the halter collars. Looking really good. They're probably weighing high sevens, not quite 8 if I had to guess. The grass is a little bit slow to come this year. It's May 18th. Looks like about April 18th. So like I said, our pastures were in really good position because of last fall. So definitely eating some more older grass than you'd expect given it's May 18th. So we're still caking, still putting out protein tubs like your cows. We're still putting the protein tubs out, which, is not a regular thing for us to do on, May 18th. But just a little slow to come. But hopefully we catch some rains and, it catches up.
That's so wild because everything here is at least a month ahead of schedule. Our river's running, our grasses, everything is a month ahead.
Yeah. Well, we need a rain.
Maybe if I quit taking every bit that comes by, it'll maybe make its way over to you.
It's you guys.
Gosh dang it. Well, tell everybody about our new big news.
Well, we found ourselves a sponsor. Can you believe it?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
I'm so excited.
we should talk about why we started this podcast and how surprising it is we have a sponsor this early.
Right? We've talked about it just a little bit before. Logan and I have known each other for years, and then we were sitting in a bar in Nashville at NCBA this year and said, "Hey, we ought to start a podcast and just talk about the things that we talk about anyways." And then here we are, started it up, and we just kind of did it as something that we wanted to try out and see if it was, maybe it'd save us a phone call during the week.
Yeah, we literally started this for us, for fun, just for fun. So we had Jen and JW reach out to us, friends of ours, and they're like, "Hey, how do we become sponsors?" And we're like, What's that?"
Yeah, we don't know how that works, but it sounds cool, guys.
Yeah, so Eastco will be the sponsor here in, this is a free shout out, but in 2 weeks from now. And they bought 15 episodes. So
Yeah, that's so exciting. And Jen, JW, thank you guys for thinking of us. And the podcast has grown kind of exponentially faster. We didn't really even think about a growth curve when we started this. We just thought, well, let's get on this thing and chat a little bit and see if anybody likes it. And we've been really lucky. People seem to find some value in this.
yeah, and what's interesting is we don't have a lot of views. It's like a few thousand, but the feedback that we get is the few thousand that listen are the ranch managers, the decision makers on the ranch, which is kind of interesting, as expected, I guess, but kind of interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I think with the new followings of people kind of finding out about our podcast, obviously we've advertised it a little bit through our social medias and then here again too. And not only is it just the decision makers, it's the young guys that are starting to work on ranches that someday want to be the decision makers. And if you're going to become the boss or the CEO or ranch manager, however you want to title that position on any operation, I think those younger people that are starting, they already have something that most of the rest of the crew don't. There's a lot of guys that like riding the big circles out in Nevada, and that's all they want to do for their career, which is awesome. And there's no shame in that. That's one of the coolest jobs there is out there. See more country than anybody. But the guys that want to be the number crunchers and know more about how the business is working and the gears are grinding in it, I think those guys that are coming up through those ranches already have that instinctively in them, and they want to get involved.
Yeah, yeah, it's a core demographic that we're hitting. So if you want to be a sponsor, the next 15 are booked. So give us a shout. If you reach out, it's a different charge.
We're getting excited here, Logan. I think this is the first time anybody's ever asked us for our help.
Yeah, it's nice to make a buck outside of borrowing $1 million from my banker and
And
doing
having
it
to
the
ride
hard
it
way.
for a year and a half.
Yeah, borrowing a few million from my banker, and then hoping most of them don't die.
Yeah, yeah. It's really funny. The other day, my wife was asking because she's from Wyoming, didn't grow up on a ranch, and has grew up in a ranching community, but just never really saw how the day to day works. And we were discussing doing trades basically with cattle and how yours and mine, where we're buying these cattle in the winter and then we're not really selling them for 9 to 12, 13 months, and we're holding on to them. And there's a lot of money and time and risk hung out there for a long time. And I guess I grew up that way, so it just doesn't. I still sleep at night, even though we've got all this stuff out there. But I was talking to her about how when I went to Wally Olson's school and explaining, I was like, I never thought about the guys in Oklahoma or the guys in Kansas that can go to the sale barn 20 minutes down the road, bring them home, run them for a month or two, and then get that trade and understanding those soft markets. And my wife's like, man, I didn't even think about that either. All those guys, and like we've said, a lot of guys run 15 to 50 head, and that works perfectly for those guys. But for me, when I turn stuff out, they're out. And it takes me not only to get them gathered, and then it takes me, kind of an extra 2, 3, 4 weeks to get a hold of the very last 5 or 6 that we turned out, 3, 4 months ago.
Yeah, I remember first year I sent you some yearlings. You're like, we're short 10. And you're like, that's really good. And we're going to find them, but it's going to take us about, 6 weeks. I was like, that's wild.
Yeah, they're somewhere. We will get them to you, but it's not going to be in the next week. That's for certain.
So what you're saying, it's a little harder to do the old buy sell when you can't gather them in a month.
Yeah. Yeah. And Wally was very understanding. I told him where I was. He's like, oh, yeah, this guy's got a different deal going on than the rest of you guys down here in Oklahoma. So, which is, part of the reason that this halter thing's really worked for us is we can, even when they aren't inside of the virtual fence, they're still GPSed and you can find them. So if you know where that dot is, you can go there and at least get them. Rather, maybe they're not following your virtual fence, but you can at least find them.
Yeah, so we have your cows on the main ranch, and we never did get a tower for that property. And we've got 2 towers on the East Ranch, and they're separated by probably about 7 miles, and you can still see where the cows are. You can't control them, but you know where they are.
Right.
Which has a lot of value.
Yeah, and tell me, are you using AI or anything in figuring out how to move those cattle around with the collars, or how to move them around, or anything like that?
We're not. So Jen wanted us to talk about AI, and how we're using it. I'm not. Halter uses AI. I'm not using AI as anything with Halter. But what I did use AI for, let's back up a little bit. My dad and I are both very analytically minded, and we spend a lot of time in Excel. To manage this business, we have probably 80 Excel sheets that we use and customize, and AI is slowly replacing that for me. So I went to close out we worked with 3 different feedlots, and instead of manually closing them out and calculating that, I just uploaded those invoices into Grok and said, and the interesting thing is I uploaded them, and it fed me not great data at the beginning. Like, so the first 5 minutes I had nothing that was worthwhile, but I refined it, and I worked with it to kind of refine the data. And after about 15 minutes, I think I had some really good comparable data to compare the 3 different feeding situations: cost to carry, cost to gain, average daily gain, and had it compute death loss and interest as part of it. And I did it outside of Excel for the first time ever, and it was good data. And out of habit, I just inputted it into Excel so I could compare it to the prior years. But it actually did the closeouts for me.
So when you're doing that, are you basically taking that email that you got from the feed yard and you're doing a copy and paste into Grok? Is that how you do that?
Yeah. Yep. So I did that, and like I said, it took a the first iteration was not great, but so it took some refinement, but it got there. And so it took me 15 minutes with Grok. I would have spent probably an hour and a half doing that in Excel. So not a lot of work, but it definitely eliminated, cut it in more than half.
Yeah. I'm finding the same thing. I was just giving an example to a gal yesterday that's asked how I'm using AI, and I've used it for everything from letters of recommendation to many other things, including coming up with mapping and stuff for making paddocks and how I'm going to manage my pastures. And say to make the letter of recommendation I did for this person, and the amount of information that person gave me was a lot. They've done a lot of things. And I took all that information, put it into, I use Perplexity a lot. And I bet in 3 minutes and I read through it. Everything was right, looked good, looked professional. And it's kind of learned the way that I talk, type, those kind of things. So it sounds just like I would have written it or said it. And then kicked that back out, and probably took me 3 minutes. So 27 minutes back in my day that I would have used just, typing that thing up.
Yeah, and you
So
were using it on some grazing plans.
yeah, so we've used it for your heifers specifically. I put in a plan based on where I live. And so I said, hey, I'm in the Little Snake River Valley. I own property X, Y, and Z. And then also these properties up here on Battle Creek. So I've got kind of a T that comes from the north, shooting south. It's an upside down T, and then runs into the Little Snake. So I'm grazing this big T. And how do I do that the most efficiently without walking these cattle further than they need to? Because what we're trying to do is we're not so worried about putting pounds on your heifers as we are getting them bred. But what we found is if they're at 2 pounds of a day or better of gain, the breed up goes up exponentially once you hit that 2 pounds of gain. So basically, am I worried that if your heifers are going to make 3 pounds? No. But if I can keep them at 2 pounds or better, then the breed up is going to be where you're going to be satisfied and I'm going to be satisfied with that. So how do we walk them the least amount from paddock to paddock? And in doing that, I put that in and I used Onyx. So that's where my mapping came from. And I kind of highlighted the areas that I'm using to graze, and boom, it just spit me out a grazing plan with the least amount of walking pasture moves available.
Wow. I do want to tell you about a story where AI led me astray. We have an older planter. We got a 15-year-old planter. It's a 1720. And there's a up-down switch on it that signals when the planter's up or down. And I was in the cab, and we were having some trouble with it. And I took a picture of it, and it said, "This is not a stock sensor." And I spent probably 20 minutes working with it to come up with like a replacement. It said, "This is not a stock sensor, but I'll get you the part numbers. I'll look at the parts list at the store in Imperial, and I'll get you all set up and everything that you need." And so I spent 20 minutes coming up with like some replacement parts for it that would plug and play. I was very impressed. I was like, wow, this is doing great work. Saved me a lot of headache when I get to the parts counter. And then I show up to Joanne shows up. He gets in the planner. So I go to 21st and get to the parts counter, and the parts guy, I'm like, "Can I get these 3 parts?" And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Okay, I got those." And he's like, "What you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm replacing a non-stock sensor." And he's like, "Oh, what, for what?" 1720, which is a very common planter. And he's like, "Well, just show me a picture." And I show him a picture of what I set to Grok. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's stock. And I have it in stock today." I'm like, son.
Yikes. Wow.
So
That's amazing.
20 minutes down a rabbit hole where, a 5-second conversation with a human, solved it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's, we've talked about this back and forth, and what jobs are going to be lost in this AI world. And you think back of, in the book Undaunted Courage that I've talked about before, they talk about how nothing had really advanced until this was like 1840, I think, or 1805, 1804, 05, that time. And nothing had advanced. There's, horse and cart, that was the big deal. The wheel was pulled, that was great. And for 100 years, nothing had really moved. And then all of a sudden you have steam engines and those kind of things start up. But since we've gotten into the Industrial Revolution, and then boom, it's been going faster and faster. And now we've hit AI, and it's like it's a new revolution. It's just unbelievable how fast things can move now and how much information we can get, whether it's good or bad. But it's certainly moving and changing at a pace that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, it's going quick. And so when we came up for the advertising thing for the podcast, I imported our viewership, and I'm like, hey, what should we charge these people? And back it off a little bit, and invoiced them yesterday. And instead of, logging onto I was out sitting in the sun, and just says, hey, Grok, come up with an invoice for this. And just boom, in a minute, it was done. And then for the outline for the podcast is something that we could do. We come up with all of this stuff on our own, but we're like, hey, give us an outline so we kind of stay on task. That's one of those things you just push it to AI, and it just makes it's just like an easy button.
Yeah, I sit down and look at this thing. I print it all out, the basic idea that AI sends out, and then I go through and highlight it or underline it, whatever it is. And these are the points we really want to make sure we hit and not miss these things. And it's so easy. It's just changing things so fast. I think let's visit a little bit about, I'm going to screw this up, Mustafa Solomon.
Oh yeah, the CEO of Microsoft.
Right. Yeah. And I actually threw that into just chat this morning. And I know I said that I use Perplexity, but if I got something really simple, I just go to chat because it's like the basic, right? And so I said, hey, tell me about, what he said is going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. And he says, in quotes, entire jobs disappearing overnight is what it kicks back at me. And that's pretty scary. And it's naming junior software engineers, basic accounting, bookkeeping, marketing, content, administration, coordination, paralegal. And I want to get into this. So I was having a drink with my brother-in-law yesterday, who works for a startup company that sells meat, and it's like a door-to-door delivery business. And he was telling me that they use it all the time, and it is saving them so much time. It's probably 2 labor units in their company.
Really?
And then one thing that he told me on the legal side is how much money it saved them in lawyers, because they'll go in there and say, okay, say it's a trademark. He said, we'll go in there and say, okay, do X with this trademark barrier. So it's got walls on it. It knows it can't go outside of, legal trademark thoughts. And so it does that. And he said the amount of money we're saving on lawyers, because we'll do all this and then still run it by the lawyer, but the work's done for them. So the cost of the lawyers significantly less. It's been checked over by a lawyer, but they're just sending him the work that he was going to have to put together.
Wow. I mean, it is. I also saw the CEO of Citadel said that AI for them is replacing PhD finance students. Like it's not paralegal. Like we're talking, advanced modeling. And he said he went home that day when he realized that, and he's like, this is going to change everything.
Yeah, I read that. And he said on his way home, he was just really sad because it is changing everything, maybe for the better for the investors and the people that are, invested in making money on Citadel, but for the humans, for society, it is an overall possible loss, if you want to look at it that way, because it's just taking jobs that would be somebody's household income and is now not needed.
Yeah, so we both attended graduations this weekend. Can you imagine sending your kids to college this year? And, what is the world going to look like in 4 years?
I have a nephew that is crazy smart, and he was teaching. He was helping the teacher teach the class in high school of how to do coding.
Wow.
And that is now stuff that's, you don't need to do coding anymore because AI can do it. So he's in this shift category of kids that grew up that are really smart and figured out how to do that stuff. But now all the things that they learned are being replaced. So he's figuring out where his shift is, and he's a computer science major. So be interesting to see where he ends up. But he's super interested in doing like uh, they call it white hat hacking. So it's
Okay.
being like a U.S. Um, say CIA or FBI or something, and you're basically protecting U.S. interests from China or Russia or whoever, and making sure they're not hacking into U.S. systems.
That makes sense. So you're trying to hack US systems so that other people can't.
Basically, yeah. So you've got all this information that's out there, and you're figuring out how to either block or by breaking into the U.S. system, you're like, all right, this is how I did it. This is how I need to block it.
Cool. It'd be imagine what his job is going to look like in 4 years from now. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So, but my kids, I don't know that they're using AI, but I know that they should be.
Yeah.
They're going to be left behind if they're not. And I feel like as a parent, I'm not doing my job in helping them in the world, whether it's they want to come back here to the ranch and close out cattle inventories and use it for pasture management, or they want to go do government hacking or be accountants or whatever they want to do. How can you gain those skills now when you're in high school so that when you get out in the job market, you're wanted?
Yeah, that's kind of a catch-22. I've got a friend group where I've a few friends that are reluctant to adopt AI, and I would be one of them, right? Like if I could choose to live in a world where there was no AI in the future, I probably would opt for that. But no one asked me, no one called Logan Priven and be like, hey, should we go forward with this AGI, or do you want us to stop it? I don't get to choose that. So, a friend of mine, he said it very eloquently. Paul said, uh, I have, my job is going to be obsolete in a couple years. And so it's like, I've got to position myself to ride this wave, because I will not be employable as a coder in 5 years. And so like, I just have to ride this wave. I don't get to choose. I can choose to crash or I can choose to ride. And I've chosen to ride the wave.
Yeah. Do I want to pay my mortgage or not?
Exactly. You're exactly right. It's like the bills are still coming, and I better figure out how to pay them.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a real world example of where I think this stuff could really help is, excuse me. Uh, so my employees from Mexico have not gotten here yet.
Still,
And I'm
okay.
hoping sometime this week. And because they're not here, and the immigration department, like everything else, was doge so hard, they don't have enough help to get uh, the paperwork done to get guys into the country. And my neighbors all say the same thing. Everybody's going through the same problems. And so, could they be able to use AI to say, okay, this guy's been up, he's worked in the United States before, we automatically AI just says, nope, this guy's never had a problem. We're good. And just kind of rubber stamps those guys because AI has already done the research for the immigration person that would have had that job to go through all that stuff. But can we do things like that to help speed up the process? Because to me, in a world where everything is moving so fast, everything needs done now, everybody wants what they want right now. But then when you get into agriculture, our cost of fertilizer has gone up, our cost of fuel has gone up, our employees have gone up, and we can't get them. So it's like they're leaving agriculture behind, and guys like you and me are wanting to use AI. Well, how can we implement this stuff to help you and I keep moving the ball forward?
Yeah, well, I bought Tesla stock late in the game because I think that Optimus, when it comes out, and it's supposed to come out in a couple years, and price should be right around like 30 grand. And So talk about, if we get AGI, you plug it into a robot that doesn't need to sleep. I think that will be for ag. I think that will be a game changer. So that's why I bought Tesla stock, which I was down 5% Friday.
Boy, I'm really excited about. Is it Starlink that's going to IPO?
Is it? I I did
I
not
think
see that.
Starlink is about to IPO. I think is what I read, and I've been talking to the guy that does my investments for me, and I'm like, man, just let me know how much you need, and I will try to get you whatever
Yeah.
that takes. I
And you and I talked about it. Like if we're connecting cows to Starlink, nothing will not be connected. Like cows are the last thing that you hook up to the internet.
why are we going to hook cows up?
Yeah.
So,
So it's like your refrigerator is going to be hooked to Starlink, your
yep.
your
And
tractor.
as I personally was an early adopter of Starlink, I talked to my neighbor who was even earlier than I am, and he's got a cabin up in the mountains and loves to go up there with his family. But when he's up there, he's like, I'm a rancher. Have many businesses, all these things. He's like, I can't just shut off because then my whole operation starts to fall off. So I do need to still be connected on a certain level. And he got Starlink, and he's like, I can't believe how good it works. I am in the middle of nowhere, and it works great. And so I got it and I put it in my pickup. And then pretty soon, my sister got it and put it in her pickup. And then the next thing I bought it for my main guy, Chandler, and he's got it in his pickup. So when he's out in the desert and he needs to do a cattle shift with our collars, he can just do it right there in his truck in the middle of nowhere with Starlink. And now we're going to get it for our cowboys that are going to be up in cow camps with these cows this summer so they can, move them, pause them, whatever they need to do with their collars. So it's a revolutionary technology.
Yeah, it is. The world is changing faster than I anticipated.
It's hard to believe growing up playing Oregon Trail on the computer where you would press the button and then you'd watch that little oxen pull the cart at Mach -5 and then just, and you'd sit there and watch the little oxen walk along on a really little computer screen and then 2 minutes later it'd say, okay, one of the kids has syphilis or,
You've died of dysentery.
died in dysentery. Yeah. So, and then you like, okay. And then it walks some more and then it comes up with whatever it was trying to come up with for, oh, you need to hunt. You're out of food. So yeah, it was really, it's the world's moved pretty fast for guys like you and me that started with Oregon Trail and
Yeah,
elementary
and
school.
now the internet is controlling our cows on an individual basis.
Yeah. Yeah. What a crazy twist that took on us, huh?
The reality is much wilder than anticipated, as always.
Yeah. Well, I have another great story I thought I'll throw in here just kind of to switch gears.
Let's hear it.
So my sister Megan was getting married, and we have a cookhouse on our ranch with that makes 3 meals a day, and we've talked about this. We eat breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, and dinner at 7. And so this cook was pretty busy all the time, and they were often wound a little tight. And she is making this huge uproar right as we're getting ready to have my sister's wedding, which was like a 500 plus person wedding in the front yard at our ranch. And so this cook is coming off the handle. And my dad went up to her and he said, whatever you're going to do next, do now. And so she went and packed all her things and just like an explosive leaving, but it happened the day before the wedding. So all this wreck that potentially could have happened during the wedding happened the day before. Whatever you do next, do now.
Was that a cue to leave?
I don't know if that was a cue to leave because we really try to leave the cook hiring and firings to my mom because
She's the backup.
she's the head honcho there, and you know how matriarch mothers are, and my mother is one of those, and the cook job was passed from her mother to her, and it's just the worst job on the ranch hiring and firing the cook, And we've had so many great cooks in my life, but boy, we've had a lot of cooks. My mom's actually writing a book called The Cookbook about all the cooks we've had and different things that have happened with cooks. And so if she ever gets that finished, I'll give her a shout out here on the podcast because it will.
I would love to read it.
I also look forward to reading it. My mom is a published author. She's written several articles in New York Times and other things, and she wrote some children's books. So this ought to be, better than just her doing a little chicken scratch and telling some funny stories about cooks. So it ought to be great.
How many cooks has your mother seen in her life?
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine her. At least in my lifetime, I bet I'm 40. I bet I've easily seen 50 to 60 cooks in my life.
So double it for your mom, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least double that. But we did have a cook when I was a little kid. My grandpa had a guy from Mexico, and his wife worked for him. And this guy was my grandpa's main guy. And his wife came up, and she was the cook. And they had 2 kids they raised on the ranch that are still close friends of our family. And they... she would make fresh tortillas every day. I think she was the cook for my grandmother for 15, 20 years. So, sometimes you'll have a 3-cook summer, and then sometimes you get a cook like that, which is rare. I think the longest cook we've ever had in my lifetime was probably like 5 years.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but sometimes you get a 3-cook summer or more, and it's exciting. Never a dull moment. Yeah. Tell me, you were saying you blew up a tractor?
I did. Yeah, I blew up a tractor. So thermostat went bad, and it was a windy day, and it was operating just fine until you stopped the tractor and idled it, and then it would overheat, like when you were out of the cab. And so yeah, blew up an engine in our big tractor, 8345. I mean, I'm meeting with the sales guy after this podcast. So it should be interesting. Might be spending a lot of money later today. But the interesting thing is I'll give you a list of all of the employees that have blown up an engine in a tractor since I started in 2012, so the last 14 years. And the list is as follows. Jeff Pribino, Logan Pribino. End of list.
Well, your list is more personal than my list. God.
So, and the farm guy that I've got, Johan, I told him, I was like, I am so glad that I did this and not you. If you had done this, I would be so furious with you.
Yeah.
What were you thinking? Like,
it's way better when the boss does it, and there's a little self-reflection.
Exactly. I've had a lot of time to, we haven't been operating through the weekend because of the rain and the tractor not working. So I've had a lot of time to think on it. And yeah, long story short, I'm glad it was me and not an employee.
What could Logan Pribino have done different to not blow up the engine in the tractor? Or was it just his time?
Yeah. So, I tried to blow out the radiator and do a bunch of other things when it was just a problem. You try to diagnose, and what I could have done was just call the shop right away. Just be like, hey, I've got a problem. I'm not going to try to blow out the radiator. And then the fact that that was overheating at idle was a huge problem, because when it overheats, you just have to shut the tractor off, which is exactly what you're not supposed to do when your tractor is overheating, and shut it off, because you need the coolant system functioning. But anyway, long story short, I'll probably be buying a tractor in an hour.
God. John Deere.
Yeah. Hey, John Deere, if you'd like to sponsor this podcast, please.
You guys run all John Deere, don't you? You have all John Deere stuff, don't you?
I do, yeah. I experimented with some different Agco and Crustbuster, and I am a John Deere. I will not buy a non-John Deere implement for the rest of my life because I tried to not do John Deere for a little bit, but I'm one of those weird guys that am all green.
Yeah, I think you're pretty common in the United States. John Deere's made a great product for a long time, and I think that green paint is very expensive, but it also comes with some old knowledge of making sure a good tractor works. We have had a John Deere. We don't currently. I don't want to give a shout out to every company that makes a tractor, but I do. One of my recommendations to people, if you're going to own several tractors, is that get them all the same company. And we did that. We switched companies maybe 5-10 years ago, and we bought all the same color tractor. And those guys come out once a month, and they go through every single machine, and that is it. We don't have to. The amount of breakdowns, our repair bills got significantly better once we went all with one and said, okay, come this day every month and go through them, check the oil, and then they often see a problem in the shop before they come out to do my deal, and they see the same 126 or whatever that tractor is that's had the same problem with 3 or 4 different ones. So they check it out on my tractor before I have that breakdown, and often they might even bring the part with them. They're like, hey, they'll call me, be like, hey, this thing's had this problem recurring in several. They're the exact same model as yours. Do you want me to go ahead and replace it? And usually I'm like, well, that's the whole purpose of this situation I got myself in of buying all the same thing. So yeah, go ahead and replace it before I have a breakdown. So we've done that a few times, and I think having the same color machinery has been valuable for me.
Yeah, you need one guy that can take care of you. Be loyal and make sure they look after you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's visit a little bit about conservation easements.
Yeah, let's. And broadly speaking, one of the topics that we have slated here is how our businesses manage land acquisition, how we view the cash flow. How do we grow our businesses through purchasing land? And big one for you is conservation easements. I'm going to talk a little bit about cash flow, the targets that we have, and you need to constantly be growing. And I've got an example of where we stopped growing in the farm ground, and it's kind of hurt us. But yeah, launch us into it, and let's talk about your thoughts on growing your business.
Right. So we've done many conservation easements. My parents started doing conservation easements for multiple reasons. They're not going to say extreme, but very conservation minded, and Leopold Award winners, and that's all my parents. I'm not going to take any credit for our Leopold Award. Obviously, grew up with parents and a family that believed in conservation and learned those practices and principles and care about the birds and the beavers and the bees as much as I care about the grass and the cattle and the rivers and all of those things. So I'll just start it with that. But we've done conservation easements for a long time. I've done a couple. My parents did several. I think we've done 8 on our ranch in total. Some with Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, some with Nature Conservancy, one with American Farmland Trust, and they've all been different, all been good in the long run. And there were, times that we did it because we were thinking, oh, there's an opportunity to purchase something here, and if we have this easement, then there'll be both dollars coming in. We'll take care of this easement, which covers our land ethic and our values. We don't want to see our beautiful mountain ranch turn into a Boulder, Colorado, or a Steamboat 3. There's a Steamboat 2 outside of Steamboat Springs. We don't want just more and more people moving into our part of the world. And I think everybody sees that everywhere that they're in a beautiful spot. I think there's people moving out west.
So for your conservation easement, what % of the value do you get out of the easement?
It's more or less 50%. So if the land's worth $1 million, you get more or less $500,000.
Okay.
And
that's been a heck of a tool for you guys.
Yeah. And, one time my parents did an easement, and this is probably the coolest story, is they were finishing up an easement, and I was young enough. I don't know exactly what their plan was. We weren't doing, you and I have talked about this, Whatby versus Whitby. working on the business versus working in the business is what those stand for. And so I wasn't a part of those conversations, but they finished an easement in the place across the road, which was owned by my cousins, was coming up and was available to purchase. And they were able to do a 1031 or reverse 1031 exchange, and they were able to take that money from the easement and purchase the ranch across the road. And it didn't pay for 100%, but it was certainly enough that the bank was willing to go along with it because they had so much money to put down on this new purchase. And so it blocked us up. It's literally, I mean, you can't hardly walk off of our place without walking onto that place. So it was a major move for Ladder Ranch at that time.
And what year was that?
Oh gosh, that would have been like 2009 or 10, somewhere in there. I was just finishing college when they were doing that, and they definitely had us in. I mean, I came home and helped my parents in the summers while I was in college most years, and they had my sister and I in on those conversations, and if we were good with doing these easements, because they expected us to be home, and these would, be choices that they're making that would be more long-term impacts on us than them. And we were totally on board with it. So,
well, as an expansion tool, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be, just be expansion. It can also be for tax purposes and things like that. If you're doing a donated easement, and some people do that, and those happen a lot faster. Regular conservation easements take, oh gosh, I'm going to say minimum, if you can get one done in 2 years, you're amazing. 3 years, 3 to 4 years is probably more likely.
Yeah, and I know that the Hibbards, Cooper Hibbard and his family, they've used that as a tool on their operation. The unfortunate thing in Nebraska is that the conservation value is like 20%. So it's marginal at best.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, you've been to my ranch and I've been to yours, and I think we can understand why that is.
Well, yours is beauty is in the eye of the beholder, Logan.
Yeah. My rent's quadruple for sure, but not a lot of scenic value to the outside world. I mean, the Nebraska Sandhills are the most beautiful place on the planet to me, but like you said, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Right. And I live in one of those places that's more like, hey, you're close to a ski resort, you're close to rivers flowing through, and it's just a different kind of value that person has, and it's not necessarily going to be grazing. It might more likely be fishing and hunting. So let's talk a little bit about the cash flow targets you brought up.
Yeah. So for our operation, we tried to have, my dad he was a minority shareholder at my age, and he had to buy out a majority. He had to buy out 60%. So he was, that took a lot. That really did take a lot. Ultimately what you do is you buy assets, you own debt, and you let compound interest appreciate the assets and depreciate away the debt. And that's really the name of the game. If you're not a fan of interest, you're not managing your balance sheet. Or sorry, if you are not a fan of inflation, you do not have your balance sheet optimized. If your balance sheet is optimized, inflation is the best thing that could ever happen to you, because your assets increase and your debts decrease. So Jerome Powell, I hope that you were listening, or not Jerome Powell. There's a new Fed chair now. I can't remember his name, but anyway, our target is approximately, you want your mortgage payment to be about 80% what your rent payment would be, if that makes sense. So the mortgage debt, it's not based on a number, it's just the payment, and you want it to be approximately your rental payment, essentially. And what happens over time is that it increases, and like I said, those assets they go up, and your debt really goes down, and that's how we have been able to sustain growth at Wineglass.
Yeah, and you guys have been purchasing more rangeland than farmland, correct?
Yeah, so we've been purchasing rangeland. We sold some cows last year so we could buy some more rangeland that fit us perfectly. It was on the best part of our most productive ranch, and the prices were very high, and we did not feel comfortable at the interest payments. At 7.5, really didn't feel comfortable taking a mortgage out for that. So we sold some cows to buy some rangeland, and it was a little too early. We sold those cows for like $3,500, and obviously they went up another $1,000. But what people don't understand, and people have speculated on, is like, they sold them too early. Well, the real story is we wanted to buy rangeland, and if I would have bought that and taken a loan out on it and kept all of my cows, and the price of cows halved, it would have been a very, very bad situation. Where it would have been difficult to manage. And, the fact that we were able to just sell cows and buy that rangeland has been, it's been positive.
I'd like to just make a observation that I have had recently with a rancher, and he talked about never wanting to be in debt. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how can you expand ever if you're never willing to be in debt? Like, can you save that kind of money that you're just going to go purchase a ranch by never having a bank payment, something like that? And that probably is an option for some people if your operation's big enough and you can put away $500,000 a year for 10 years. That gives you the money to go purchase someplace. Although keeping up with inflation is tough because the value of land seems to go up faster than you can save it.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
But this operator has not grown in a generation.
Yeah.
Like his father made some moves and grew, and maybe the debt that he took on, he just, by the time when he got done paying it off, he just said, I don't want to do that anymore. And I think that's what, from the outside looking in, that's what it appears happened. And we didn't get into talking about numbers and things like that because how us ranchers are. We don't like to talk about anything personal, which is why so many of us are going out of business because nobody ever talks about anything to give warnings to the others. But that's, in my opinion, I think that having a certain level of debt is valuable to the business because you can grow your business if you can manage your debt correctly. And I would say my parents and my sister and I have all made moves in our lifetimes, and using debt as a tool, but also, trying not to over leverage ourselves. But how do we purchase this thing, keep what we actually want of it, and then, sell the rest off so that we can continue to keep the piece we really wanted. And we've done that a couple different times in a couple different ways, but we've always been able to keep expanding because of those things and getting the more valuable land out of it and then creating more value to our home base operation.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head with, keep the core, keep the core intact. And if you have to sell off to keep the core and expand the core, that is a valid strategy.
Yeah. So, that's what Ladder Ranch does. And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. And sometimes it works out, even though we didn't plan on it working out that way. Yeah. But we're never nailed down to one way that we're going to do things. We're happy to shift on the fly in all cases. Drought hits, you can't stick to your original plan. Same thing.
No, you're exactly right. And land acquisition, it's awkward because you don't get to choose and decide when and how you grow. You have to roll with the punches. And, the old adage is a property only comes up for sale every other generation. So it's like, if you got a shot at it, this is it for your lifetime.
Take it and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and Ladder Ranch has very much done a lot of that.
Yeah.
Figuring it out's always the part that we're always working on.
And, so at Wineglass, we're farm and ranch diversified operation. We've really stalled the growth on the farm side. Haven't grown it in 20 years, and it's hurt us on the farm side. We've chosen to expand on the ranch side, but not on the farm side. And it's been tough watching the lack of expansion hurt our farm enterprise. And it's tough to grow in those two directions. Very, very difficult. I've seen operations do it. There's an operator in here, a neighbor that we work with that I'm big fans of, the Kenning family. They've been able to grow both directions, and it's like, wow, that's amazing that you've been able to do that, because we really have not. We've had to choose one or the other.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. That's very tough, and most families can't do it. And if you can figure out how to expand ever, let alone on both sides of your operation like that, that's huge.
Yeah, and debt, and like you said, there's a healthy amount of debt, and I think that is, for some people that's zero, but that's not the case for our family at all. That in the inflation and how it just slowly and steadily works makes it so that long-term debt is a good thing to own.
Yeah, I think so. The value of that land is just going to keep doubling every decade, more or
Yep.
less.
Yep. And your debt is going to have every
Yeah.
decade.
Yep. If you can keep up with the debt, then it's a good move in many cases. Well, let's start wrapping this thing up, Logan. So we had two big ideas today. We talked about AI stuff, and then we talked about our land strategy here at the end. And I'd love to hear from the ranch managers or the guys coming up in their ranches, whoever it is. I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you have questions or you have stories or thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people reach out because of this, and I've really enjoyed it. To be honest with you, I'm in a tractor a lot this time of year, so enjoy the calls and texts and messages on Twitter. So reach out if there's something we can hit on. You'd like us to hit us up.
Yeah, one more big thank you to Eastco, Jen and JW for reaching out, and look forward to working with you guys.
Yeah. Well, keep running on grass, Eamon.
You too, Logan. See you next time.